Hey dudes, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to create these two procedural Jade textures in Blender, no add-ons. We are going to cover a classic marbled Jade with two bump nodes for additional surface detail. We are then going to do a veined Jade texture with a lightly smoky surface. Before we jump into everything, think about hitting that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. You know you want to do it. Okay, let's get started. We're going to begin by going into the render properties right here and changing the render engine from Eevee to cycles. We're then also going to change the device from CPU to GPU compute. Make sure that under the viewport settings right here, change the max samples from 1024 to 20 for a fast render view. Let's also enable denoise, and then with the default cube selected, let's delete it and add a UV sphere. And then under the object tab right here, make sure that it is shaded smooth. With all of that done, we can then begin on texturing. Okay, let's get started on our marbled Jade texture. Let's jump into the shading tab right here, and then let's just press decimal point on the numpad to get a really close view of our UV sphere. And then we can click new right here to add a new material. And let's start off just by adding the new name for this. Let's call it Jade underscore marbled. All right, now we can just bring our nodes over to the side, and let's start off by adding a Voronoi texture. We're going to drop that right here, and then let's also add a color ramp so that way we can actually see our work a lot more effectively in progress. Let's connect the distance from the Voronoi texture to the color ramp, and the color from the color ramp to the base color of the principal BSDF. And then let's change the feature output under the Voronoi texture right here. Let's change that from F1 to distance to edge. And then let's also change this right here, the dimensions from 3D to 4D. Okay. Now let's change the colors of the color ramp right off the bat so that way we can get that Jade feel going. We're going to have 3 of these little pointers going. And let's start off by changing this black to a very, very light, like green. And I mean very light, super soft is really good. I'm thinking something like this. That's pretty good for me. Now I'm going to select this middle one, the white one right here, and we want this to definitely be a darker green. We want this to be somewhere in this region. I'm going to say that the slider is about 30% of the way up, right about there. That's pretty good. All right, now let's drag this all the way over here to where it's about just level with the end of the subtract right here. And then let's select our white slider on this end, and let's make sure that we use the eyedropper tool, and we'll just duplicate that color. All right, so we have just a little bit of a gradation from light to darker to light once again. Now, what we want to do is we're going to select our Voronoi texture, and we're going to hold down Control and press T. If you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, it will just bring up the texture coordinate and mapping node right here. And with the texture coordinate, let's just take the object right here and connect it to the vector of the mapping node. And it basically will just make all of the details of the native Voronoi texture much finer. Let's also switch into rendered view mode right now so we can just see things a little bit more faster. So what I want to do is I'm going to now introduce a noise texture. And that is going to help influence some of the scale of our Voronoi texture. And that's really going to be effective in making everything look naturally marbled. So I'm going to take the factor right here and I'm going to plug it into the scale. And right away you can see, if you've watched some of my previous videos, we get that effect. We get like this sort of natural sort of looking marbling effect. But let's just take this a little bit further, and we're going to now add a wave texture. And this is going to go between the noise texture and the Voronoi texture right here. But I want to make sure that the factor of the noise texture, as it's already connected to the vector, I don't want that. I want that connected to the scale. That's a really important detail. Don't miss that. So, okay, now that we have all of that going, now we can start making some changes to these textures. So first off, we want to make sure that the detail on all of these textures is set to 15. That's just going to give us the best look overall, the most realistic look. So just change the detail on all 3 textures to 15. So right away, it looks a little bit nicer. So what I want to do right here is I'm going to just start making a little bit of changes to the noise texture, but I'm also going to take the vector from the mapping node and I'm going to plug that into the vector of the noise texture. And as you can see, once again, it makes things a little bit finer, tailors it a little bit better to the shape of the object. So I'm going to change the scale from 5 to 1.5. And then I'm going to leave everything else alone. I'm just going to leave all of these other settings alone. Now I'm going to come over here to the wave texture right here. I'm going to change it from the X right here. I'm going to change that to Y. And I'm also going to change it from sin to triangle. I like the way that looks a little bit better. So now I'm going to just change the distortion right here to 2.5. I think it just gives it a little extra detail. I like the way that looks. And then we're going to leave the rest of these settings right here alone. Okay. Now, regarding the Voronoi texture right here, you can do really anything you want, but for the most part, I'm going to leave everything else alone. You can start manipulating the W actually. I think I may just leave it at 1. I'm just going to leave that at 1. If we just decrease it back to 0, you can see that I just think it adds a little extra detail right there. So that's good. Anyway, now we have a really good basis for our Jade. Let's also now change the roughness right here. Let's change our roughness to 0.2. I think Jade usually, you see it has a nice polish to it, so that'll solve that. So let's start off by adding a bump node to give it that extra surface detail right here. Let's just drop that right here. And with our color ramp color, let's plug that into the height right here. And then let's just plug the normal into the normal. And as we get a little bit closer, we can just change this up, change the distance, and let's change this to 0.006. And you can see right here, it just gives it a little bit of that detail. Not too much, it's subtle. It's nice for a close-up, I think. As we get a little bit closer, it doesn't have too much going on. It's just enough to catch your eye. I really like the way that looks. So now let's just bring these over here, the principal BSDF and material output. Let's bring those over here and let's duplicate this bump node and let's drop it right here and it'll automatically connect. And then what we want to do is take the wave texture. Let's take the color of the wave texture and then let's plug that into the height of our second bump node. And it just gives it a little bit additional detail. And I think everything really ties together really nicely. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I think this looks really, really good overall. And obviously you can, you know, make changes to it. You can manipulate the scale of the noise texture to get a more dense, sort of almost lightly weathered look if you prefer. You can start messing around with the distortion to just intensify the marbling if you wish. You can do quite a bit. You can go over the scale and, you know, just increase the scale of everything right here and get a wildly different look. But yeah, that is what I'm really happy with this look. So then we are ready to move on to our second texture. Okay, let's get into the veined Jade texture right here. Let's just duplicate this UV sphere right here and let's move it on the X-axis. And then let's just hit this little tab right here that says add new material. And let's just change the name of this to Jade _ veined. And we are going to delete all of these. Let's just delete everything right here. Okay, now what we want to do is we're going to start off by adding another Voronoi texture, but we're going to have a completely different setup. So let's add our Voronoi texture right here. And then let's add our color ramp. If I can learn how to spell. All right, now let's connect the distance to the factor and the color to the color right here. And let's get our colors going. This is definitely going to be a little bit different than our first one. So what we want to do is we're going to have 3 colors going here. And we're going to select our black color right here. And we're going to bring this slider up really high. I would say about 90% of the way. And then we're going to just drag this to where it's about in this region. You're going to have to finesse the colors to see what, you know, works best for you. This is the region I'm going in. Okay. Now I'm going to select the middle slider right here. And I want this one to be a little bit, not as dark but I don't want it to be as light either. So I'm going to take this slider and I'm going to bring it to about right here. And I'm going to bring it, I don't know, not quite halfway, about, I would say 60%. And then let's drag this slider. We want this one really, really close. So let's bring it right about here where I would say it's just aligned with the vertical line of the plus sign. And then finally, let's take this one right here. And then what we want to do is use the eyedropper tool to duplicate our very first color. Oh, it didn't do it. It didn't do it. Let's just do it manually. So I'm just going to bring this up here. And then I want to leave this to be about halfway. I was going to just darken it anyway. So now I'm going to drag it to where it's about right here, even with the minus sign, just that edge of it right there. Now let's also change the feature output from F1 to distance to edge, and it immediately gives us that cracked, veined sort of look immediately. You can't do it without that. So let's just make sure that our Voronoi texture is selected. And what we want to do is hold down Control and press T, bring up our texture coordinate and mapping node right there. And let's obviously connect the object to the vector, make those details a little bit finer. And what we want to do for this one is add a noise texture like we did before, but we're not going to add a wave texture after that. We're then going to just add a math node. So what we're going to do here, drop the math node right here, and we're going to connect the factor from the noise texture to the top value, and then connect the value from the math node to the scale. And we get a nice veining right here. That's nice. But let's also connect the mapping to the noise texture vector right here. And then we're going to just increase the detail all the way to 15 on that noise texture, and then increase the scale to 15.5. And then what we're going to do is just change the value on the add. Let's change this to 3.5. And as you can see, it brings back all of our veining, but it still enables some of the noise texture to have a little bit of that jaggedness, so it doesn't look like a stock Voronoi distance to edge texture right off the bat. So that's what we do with that. Anywho, let's go over to the Voronoi texture right here. Let's increase the detail all the way to 15. And then we can just bring this out just a little bit so we can just see our, everything a little bit better. And I want to change this setting. I want to change this to 35 just to make it a little bit brighter. Just brings all of those edges a little bit brighter. Okay, now what we're going to do here is I want to drag these out a little bit further because we're going to do a few more things. I'm going to add a noise texture right here. I'm going to bring that right there, and I'm going to duplicate this color node, which is going to be connected here in a moment, but I want to add a mix color. Before I start manipulating that noise texture and color ramp, I want a mix color node because we need that. We're going to use this in conjunction with our current vein texture to give it that smokiness. So I'm going to connect the factor of this noise texture right here to this color ramp. I'm going to select this color ramp, and then press backspace to completely reset it. And then I'm going to connect this color to color B. And as you can see, it kind of gives a little bit of smokiness, but it's not correct exactly. That's because we need to come down here and we need this black to be a green color. We're going to bring this up about halfway. We're going to finesse this color a little bit. I kind of want something in this range. This is good. Yeah, so slider about halfway, kind of where the green starts to slightly meet the blue. And then let's drag this over to right around the area, just about the G. Yeah, just about the G. All right, just under that. Okay, now with that done, we can start adding a few bump notes. Let's start off by adding a few bump notes. I also, now that I look at it, I'm going to just lightly increase the roughness to 0.25. So it's not as exact as our previous marbled veined, or our previous texture. So anywho, I'm going to now hold Shift, press A, and I'm going to type in bump. I'm going to drop this right here. And then what I'm going to do is just take the result of our mix color node right here and plug it into the height. And then plug the normal into the normal of the principal BSDF. I'm going to get a little bit closer so we can see everything a little bit better. Then we're going to increase the distance right here to 0.008. And it just gives things a little bit of detail, subtle detail. And let's invert it a little bit. I kind of wanted those veins to be in, so this solves that perfectly. All right, now that I look at it, I want these veins to be a little bit thinner, so I'm going to take this and just bring this in a little bit like that. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Okay, cool. Now, I'm going to go back to this noise texture down here, and I'm going to increase the scale to 15, just so it's a little bit more, scattered. I'm also going to increase the detail to 15 right there. And I think that is looking quite nice right there. I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, so I think, let's take a little bit of a better look at these. Yeah, cool. Well, I think those are definitely 2 Jade textures. Let's pop into the layout tab right here. Let's add a plane, and let's scale it up to make it really, really big. Let's move it down on the Z-axis right here. Let's go back into the shading panel, and with that selected, let's select the veined texture for the floor, and we'll click on this double page icon to add a new material, make it independent. And then let's go into camera view mode, and let's increase the scale on this. Let's increase this to about, let's go 7, just full on 7. Then we'll go back into layout right here, go into camera view mode, rendered. Let's select the light, and I'm going to duplicate it, move it on the X axis to right about there. I'm going to select both lights, and then I'm going to duplicate them, and I'm going to rotate them on the Z-axis, so I just have that nice sort of coverage. I'm going to also then just move these 2 spheres, and yeah, that is the scene right there. So yeah, I hope that you guys learned something today. I hope these textures help you out in your various projects, and think about hitting that like and subscribe button, checking out some of my other content. I've definitely got some more videos coming along the way. I've got some new subjects coming along the way. Hope you guys had a good time watching the video, and just, have a good day out there. Create something awesome. Take it easy.